Welcome back to Dev Odyssey, a developer's journey through IT, where I cover tutorials and reviews of IT tools and technologies. I'm your host, Orest, and today we're covering how to use your computer the right way. And that's not to say you are using it the wrong way, but there's definitely better ways you could probably be using your computer. And I think so with a virtual machine. Now you may be wondering, what is a virtual machine? Well, a virtual machine is like a virtual computer. It's a computer that's run via software. Just as Microsoft Word and Google Chrome are both software or programs, a virtual machine is the same thing in that way. It's basically a computer within a computer. What are the benefits of a virtual computer or a virtual machine? Well, there's quite a few to list. One is backups. So it's really hard to back up your normal computer in general. If you're using Mac, you can use Time Machine, and if you're using Windows, you can use other backup software. But usually backups are not so easy. But with virtual machines, it's just as easy as taking a snapshot. It's almost like saving a file. It's very, very simple. And restoring is just as simple as well. It's like uploading a file or opening a new file. And this ties into security and privacy. So if you ever have any issues, let's say with viruses or malware, well, you can always shut that virtual machine down right in that instant and upload an old snapshot, and it's basically as if nothing ever happened. It's not so easy when that happens on a hardware computer. And on top of it, for privacy, when you're using the internet and on your virtual machine, that's the only machine being fingerprinted. So your host-based machine or your hardware machine is not being fingerprinted because you're not using web browsing activities there. And in this case, it helps keep you private in that aspect because you can always change the virtual machine that you're using. This is very common in ad networks, and they try to get these different information on your computer so that they could target you better. And on top of that, you can also do better networking with a virtual machine. So let's say you want to just have a virtual machine that's not connected to the internet, you could do a host-based connection. Or if you want to do and have a virtual machine on the local network, you can do a bridge connection. Or even more so, you can use network area translation and have all the traffic from your computer route through into the virtual machine. And in that aspect, it's almost like your home router. Now, I think the best benefit is portability. Imagine where you can just stick a thumb drive into any computer and load up your own personal computer. You can effectively do that with a virtual machine. As long as the computer you are using has the same virtualization software or something similar, you can take your virtual machine anywhere with you, load it into a new computer, and bam, it's like you have your personal computer right there in front of you. Now, I'd really only recommend using a virtual machine when you have non-intensive activities to do. So if you're web browsing or web activities such as video watching and document editing, a virtual machine will do a good job in that aspect. But let's say you're trying to do graphics editing or you're trying to do intensive video games, you're probably better sticking off with your host-based computer or your hardware computer and not your virtual computer. Now, lastly, the only drawback to using virtualization is performance, and that's because your virtual machine shares resources from the host-based machine, and so you might run into issues of slowness, but if you're using a top-tier computer or more so a mid-tier computer, something that's very common now, you can have no problems with performance on a virtual machine. And lastly, the only requirement you really need is to have virtualization enabled in your CPU. And that really covers the benefits. Now, what good would this video be if I didn't show you how to create your own virtual machine? Well, we're just about to do that right now. Now, to get started, first we're going to need to download VirtualBox. Since I've already downloaded VirtualBox, I'm not going to go ahead and do it, but if you go to virtualbox.org/wiki/downloads, you can download VirtualBox for your operating system of choice. So for mine, I'm using a MacBook, so I have OS X, but if you're using a Windows computer, you do Windows, or if you're using Linux, you do a Linux distribution. Then, in addition, you'll need to download a guest operating system. In this case, I'm going to be demonstrating with Windows 10, so you can go to microsoft.com/en-us/software-download and Windows 10. And you'll be able to download the Windows 10 ISO here. An ISO is basically a disk image file, and what it does is it contains the operating system that we are going to use. So in this case, we go ahead and click Confirm for our Windows 10 selection. Then from there, you select the language. And then you choose 64-bit or 32-bit. You should definitely choose 64-bit, and you go ahead and click that. And the download should kick off. Well, in my case, I've already downloaded it, so I'm not going ahead and do that. Now that we have VirtualBox downloaded and the ISO downloaded, or the operating system, we go ahead and install VirtualBox. I'm not going to go through that in this case since I've already done that, but all you do is you open up the VirtualBox installer and you click through all the default values and the default prompts, accept the license and terms and agreement, and then you go ahead and it should start up. Now once you start yours, it should look very similar to this. And creating a new virtual machine in here is very simple. First we start off by clicking the New button, and here we give it a name and operating system. So in this case, I'm going to do Windows 10 VM. Leave the machine folder the way it is, unless you want to change where the file location for the virtual machine. Leave it as Microsoft Windows for the type, and then the version, you want to put it at Windows 10 64-bit. Then you go ahead and click Continue. Now I do memory size. In this case, leave it as is by default, but it'll probably be slow. This is 2 gigabytes of memory. So I would personally put it at 8 gigabytes if you can, but if you can't, you can always do 4 gigabytes. So in this case, 8 gigabytes is 8192 megabytes, or 4 gigabytes is 4096. Go ahead and click Continue. And then now it asks us to create a virtual hard disk. This is kind of like your storage, just like you have a hard drive in your computer. This is the same concept of it. Go ahead and create a virtual hard disk now. In this case, we're going to create a VDI, which is a VirtualBox disk image. This means that it can only be used with VirtualBox, which is fine. Let's go ahead and click Continue. Then you want to dynamically allocate, Continue. If 50 gigabytes is the default, I'm going to leave it at that, but right now it's not going to just take up 50 gigabytes of space. It'll only take as much as it needs, which is dynamically allocated. And that covers most of the part of the configuration. There are a couple things we need to do first though. We go ahead and have this selected for the Windows 10 VM. Then we click Settings. And then in Settings, we're going to change our storage here. And see how we have this empty disk? We're going to click that, and then we're going to click the CD to the right, and we're going to do Choose Disk File. This is going to be that file we downloaded earlier of that operating system. So let's go ahead and click that right there. We click Open. And then once we have that, we're basically ready to get started. But before we do, I can show you some of the network settings I did talk about earlier. So you see how we have attached to NAT for our Enable Network Adapter. We can have the Bridge Network Adapter that puts it on the network, internal network. You can have Host-Only Adapter where it just connects to the host machine, and other options as well. You can leave all the other settings as they are in general. We click OK. And then now we can go ahead and start it. Once we start it, you'll see we get a question here, and we go ahead and click Start. Now once we go ahead and click Start, you'll see that the virtual machine starts and it's running. So you see it's kind of small, which is okay. I wouldn't worry about that. As we go through the install later on, you'll notice that we can expand the size and change it. And then we'll be able to add something called VirtualBox tools that allow us to make it so that the display size is native to the same size of screen that we're using. So I'm not going to continue through this part of the process here as it takes a long time. But basically you want to follow through the prompts that Windows asks in order to do the install, which here is just selecting your language, adding the product key, and then it'll go through and restart a couple times for doing some updates. And then lastly, it'll ask you for some personalization settings such as Cortana, keyboard layout, and privacy with location settings, etc. But once you go through all that, you'll be almost up and running. So here I'm going to power off this machine, and I'm going to use a machine that I already installed and got working. So let's go ahead and start up this other one that I called YouTube Test. And here if you click inside, it says you clicked inside the virtual machine. You can go ahead and click Capture, which just lets the mouse stay within the virtual machine. Other than that, if you want to escape it, you use the host key, which it'll define for you, and usually is the Windows key. And then press the Windows key left side and it'll escape it. As you can see, it already did for us. And on Mac OS, it's just the command key. And now you notice, once I go in here, I click, I already have Windows 10 running. I just put in my PIN, and then now allow me to log in. Now you may see the sign up here that says Virtual Machine reports that Guest OS supports mouse pointer integration, which means you don't need to capture the mouse pointer. So basically it means you can move the mouse all around the computer without having the virtual machine needing to capture it and hold on to it. And as you can see, we have our virtual machine up. Now in order to get it full screen though, like I talked about earlier, we just have to do one thing. So at the top, if you click Devices, and then you see at the bottom here which says Insert Guest Edition CD Image. Once you do that, it'll insert that VirtualBox tools you want to install in order to get this native display size. And I'm going to go ahead and show you that right here by going to our File Explorer. And then in our File Explorer, you'll see we have our CD drive, which is VirtualBox Guest Editions. Double click the AMD one here. And what it'll do is just start an installer that installs the guest editions for you. So once you get this, all you do is you click yes. And then once you click yes, it'll start the install process for you. So go ahead and click next. We click next, next, and basically install. Do all the default options. You don't really need to get into the details here. And as you can see, it's changing the screen size, trying to figure out the native display size. And then you click finish, and it's just going to reboot your machine. Once you do that, it'll be ready, and it'll have all these additional guest features that not only include display size, but also moving files between the host machine and the guest machine, and doing a bunch of interactions on that end. Lastly, to get this native display size, as we talked about, make sure the settings you have in the view up top here, where you see it says auto resize guest display, that's what we want. And that means that it'll auto resize the guest display depending on how much space it's taking up. And that covers it for installing and creating a virtual machine. Thanks for watching this video. I really hope you liked it and got some value out of it. And if you did, go ahead and like it. And if you like this type of content and other content around tutorials of IT tools and technologies, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and click that bell for notifications so you don't miss the next video. Now, I'm only wondering, what would you do with a virtual machine? Would you use it for the reasons I mentioned earlier? What operating system would you use? Go ahead and drop me a comment below and give me your answer. I'd really like to hear it. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.